Hello and welcome to Journey into History, the Loki After Show. This is our final episode. I am Paul. This is Liz. If you don't know that by now, where have you been? Come on. Should have been following us for the last 5 episodes. Obviously, we're a bit late with this. Sorry, we both had like massive work and life commitments that have prevented us from getting on and doing this as fast as we would have liked. I do hope you guys have stuck around and you know, you're here watching it now. Got plenty to talk about in this episode, Liz. I mean,
it's a big one.
It is a big one, not just for the episode itself, but for what it does for the rest of the MCU. If you want to support us in doing these shows, please do click the link for the Patreon, which is up in the banner and down there in the comment section below, the description box, I should say, because we'd really love for you to do that. It really helps us out, and you can join in from £2 a month. I think that's low. Right, Liz, I know you're chomping at the bit for this.
It was
what do you think?
Oh geez, I mean, it was a great episode, but really what was so great about it, I think, is the way it kind of unfurls into something that I think is going to have a really big impact on the larger MCU and the next phase,
right,
of films. And I kind of think this is where they're kind of like tipping their hand a little bit and showing what they've been building up to, you know, with the shows. And it's been really clever because, you know, while all the little seeds have been there in the other shows, I think this is where you kind of start to see it coming together and you kind of start to see a direction that they're probably going to be moving in. So that was very exciting. But in terms of the episode itself, you know, it was pretty great stuff. You know, we start right where we left off, you know, Loki and Sylvie entering the Citadel at the end of time.
Not
Ravenscroft or Great Castle
Ravenscroft.
Doom, you know, no,
not any of our predictions.
No.
However, you know, you were right on one major thing, which we'll get to in a minute.
That is.
I kind of like the red herring of Miss Minutes.
Yeah, quite creepy. Quite creepy in this scene, yeah.
But there was someone did float the theory that actually Miss Minutes is like the big bad of the series, which I would have loved, but you know, would have kicked it into a kind of weirdness too far, I think. But again, like I would have been there for it, I think.
Yeah, and we really don't know like who Miss Minutes really is, if she is just this like sort of automated figment who, you know, sort of acts for Kang, or, you know, if it's actually something else or someone else. You know, that's not really clear. That's not super clear, but it's kind of an afterthought. You know, the big reveal here was obviously He Who Remains.
Yes, so not Kang the Conqueror.
So, okay, yeah, there is actually, in fact, a character, two totally separate characters. So He Who Remains is in fact a character unto himself, but what they seem to have done here is like that mishmash where they have basically combined the role that character played in like, you know, some old Thor episodes during the Simonson run, and Kang the Conqueror, which, you know, he does directly refer to himself as the Conqueror. He never says Kang, but you know who they're talking about. You know who this is.
Well, he said he's been called a Conqueror at various times. Now, can you help me out here? He Who Remains and Immortus are the same person or not?
No, Immortus is just like another sort of another identity of Kang's.
Right. Okay. Thank you. Because I was kind of wondering about that. I think it's an interesting way to play it because, you know, obviously we've had variations on Loki and other characters throughout the show. In fact, in this episode, we get to, is it this episode we saw the other? Oh no, it was the last one where we saw the variation on Renslayer. And you know, Sylvie herself is a variation on Loki. So it was interesting they played that theme out right to the big reveal, you know. And like the actor that plays Kang, I absolutely loved his performance.
He was terrific. He was, I mean, basically he just kind of chewed up the whole episode, like, and stole the scene. Like, I mean, obviously it was great, Sylvie and Loki, some of their interactions were really fantastic, but really this episode kind of belonged to him. And that conversation was, played out for the bulk of the episode, and it, completely just gripped me and had my attention, from start to finish, especially, when it goes from, okay, he knows everything that's going to happen to the moment where he suddenly doesn't, which was really cool.
And also, like, I'm surprised they went as far as they did with Sylvie and Loki. Like, I genuinely am surprised they went for romance. I didn't think they would. Can we just point out something we were talking about at the beginning of the show before we went on to air? There's a lot of sort of background noise today in both our houses. Some guys across the road from me are working on their house, so you may hear some noise from that. People are working in your house, I believe, Liz, so you may hear some
so there could be some drilling and things like that. Yeah, I apologize if that happens, but that's, it can't be avoided. So
yeah, we're really sorry. But I didn't think they would go as far as they did with Loki and Sylvie. I didn't think they would actually, do it as a romance, which is quite an interesting, weird thing for them to do. I think I said it at the time. It was kind of floated. It's like, that's bizarre for Disney. But the battle between Sylvie and Loki, I was kind of upset to see it, really, because they bonded so much throughout the series, and it was just like, this is really sad that it's going to end this way.
Yeah, I mean, it was. I mean, I thought the fight scene was really great, and it was quite sort of tragic to watch, but it kind of comes down to what I thought was one of the great lines of the show, the series as a whole, and this episode, which is that it comes down to the fact that Sylvie can't trust and Loki can't be trusted.
Yeah.
And, as Sylvie says, that puts them in a pickle. And it kind of really defines both of their characters. As I think I've mentioned in previous episodes, like, trust is like, sort of this defining trait of Loki, that you can't trust him. And with her, it's kind of the opposite, but it's still integral to both of their characters.
And yet, Loki was willing to trust Kang.
He was willing to believe Kang.
Yeah. And, that was an interesting move for Loki, because
as he says in the moment, like, I'm a liar and I believe him. I can recognize, when someone is lying. So, it's in keeping, with his character, that he would be able to identify it in somebody else.
Yeah, very true. I mean, what not alarms me, but what's more interesting for me at this point is, one, I mean, we see Sylvie disappear off through a sort of time gate. I don't know what, is there a name for those sort of things?
Oh, the doorways. I don't know, temporal doorways. I don't know. I'm making that up, but.
And we don't know what's happened to her. I mean, her kind of stuff isn't resolved for the series, I think. But we also, we get a sense, we see Kang meet his end, which we really, which we're told throughout this episode would be a bad thing.
Yeah, so we know basically what happens, if he, or in his his sort of barter, Loki and Sylvie, if neither of them are sort of running the TVA and maintaining the sacred timeline, then chaos abounds.
Yeah.
And Loki, is sort of willing to accept that and, and do, take the offer for the sake of the greater good. And that's we actually see like a, sort of a growth in his character there, that in fact, he doesn't want to do it just for a throne, which is what Sylvie accuses him of. but because he actually sees it as the lesser of evils, whereas Sylvie sees the greater evil in, the absence of free will. And she's also got her personal revenge, that has been her life's mission, but she also sees it as a greater evil to take away the free will of, all these potential variants and universes by keeping them in line.
Yeah, absolutely. And it poses an interesting question for me anyway, like where, because I do kind of believe that life puts you where you need to be. Not necessarily in the way you might expect. I do genuinely believe that. I just that somehow you will end up kind of where you're meant to be. And it's something that we've discussed sort of in personal conversations, quite a few times before. But it then kind of raises the question as to whether or not is life really predestination, or is it just a random set of happenings and coincidences and, things happening at a completely atomic scale that have no bearing directly on you, but will ultimately decide your fate. And I think that's what kind of these guys then have to face is, is it free will? Is there any such thing as free will? And if so, how best to use it? Because I think the way the episode is skewed, we're not meant to believe that Sylvie is right.
Right, where we see the the madness that sort of happens as soon as all the timelines start branching off, and what that means for our Loki, who winds up not where he thought he was. He winds up in a very different timeline, still inside the TVA.
Which I did love that even right to the end they were still pulling things out of the hat, which is as you say. He's not. I'm just going to switch on a light here, actually, Liz. Sorry, I'm going to go off camera for a sec because it's actually getting quite dark in this room. Yes, and yeah, I mean, I've got to remind them for constantly pulling things out of the hat and really kind of,
being quite ambitious.
That. Yeah. And of course, we're told that series 2 is coming. Which I can't remember if they revealed before the end of the thing. Like, did they? Or
I think
was
it was kind of a known thing, but like it hadn't been officially confirmed until that moment.
Hiddleston has come out and said that he will happily play this character for the rest of his life.
I mean, it's his, it is his most iconic role, by a country mile, and I think all the fans would be happy if he continued to play it for the rest of his life.
Yeah. And I think I wonder what's going to happen to him in between series now, like whether or not we'll be seeing him. Will season 2 pick up directly from the end of season 1? I don't know, because I think it would be to the MCU's detriment if they didn't have him in the movies every now and then.
I agree. Yeah, I mean, I think Love and Thunder is going to go by without him in it, I suspect. Which, by all accounts,
I'm already kind of disappointed.
I know, yeah, because I mean, the Thor and Loki dynamic is, absolute gold, and for what they're trying to do in Love and Thunder, I get it, because it's not really, it's Jane Foster's story. And I think to have, Loki and Thor sort of, chewing up the scenes with their, particular brand of chemistry would just kind of take away from that. But I really hope we haven't seen the last of, Loki in the movies, and Loki and, or Tom Hiddleston and Chris Hemsworth, getting to share scenes together. Because that would be, travesty, and I think people would really miss that. I would.
I mean, I certainly would, and I'm glad it's not the last we'll see of Kang, because, as I said, terrific performance. Now, whether or not he'll play those that the same way in Ant-Man, because we're told we're going to get Kang the Conqueror in Ant-Man.
Yeah.
Ant-Man 3, or Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, as it's apparently going to be known. But I wonder if we are going to get the evil version.
Oh, we are. I mean, like, that seems indisputable, because this is supposed to be the benevolent version of Kang. And, even the benevolent version is quite chilling, in lots of ways, and willing to do quite ruthless things. As he even says, I think, oh, you don't even, if you think I'm bad, you don't want to meet my variants.
Yeah. And to a certain extent, I think he's actually quite mad, this version, because he's there, as I say, at the end of time, watching it all blip by and kind of having to decide how the pieces will move. And this is the thing that kind of really excites me about the next phase, which is it's going to take on a decidedly different aspect. Now, Feige says apparently there has been a meeting where they've sat down and discussed the rules of the multiverse. So there is going to be, some guiding principles in there.
As there should be.
And kind of what it says is we're almost certainly going to get what has been rumored for No Way Home. Or maybe I don't know, because you can never trust Marvel to just do what they think they're going to do. But I think this opens up the most interesting kind of phase now. But I think at some point it's going to need some direction. So, I mean, can I talk a bit about what I think is going to be the direction of the next?
Yeah, I've been dying to talk about that stuff. Go on.
So, I think that we're not going to get the Fantastic Four till the end of Phase 4.
I absolutely agree that the Fantastic Four are going to have to play a big role in this whole big multiversal mess.
Although the Twitter account for Fantastic Four is up and running already, which is quite an interesting sort of thing.
What's on there? I haven't seen it. So.
I don't think it's anything. I'm just gonna bring it up now because I started following it today. But it's interesting that they've got the account up and running already. I've got to find it now. This is always the fun bit of the show. I really should have this queued up. But in the meantime, I think we're going to get the Fantastic Four at the end of the Phase 4. Okay. I think they won't miss out on the synchronicity of that. Plus, I think we're going to get Galactus at the end of that phase. I think all the sort of multiversal messing around will probably bring about Galactus.
That would be a big thing to happen. Literally.
I'm not sure we'll get Doom straight away. I think we'll get Doom in Phase 5 because I think Phase 5 is going to be heading into Hickman's Secret Wars territory.
I already think we're in his Secret Wars territory.
Do you think so? I don't think we're there yet. I think I think that's what it's gonna be, and that'll be their way of resetting, just as it was with the comics. They reset the sort of 616 with Hickman's Secret Wars, and they brought Miles Morales into. And the door's open. I think.
I mean, to me, it already feels like that's what they're doing with like No Way Home and everything. It kind of feels like this was the door opening between universes.
Maybe it'll flip. Maybe what we'll get is Fantastic Four and Doom for the end of this, and I can see them carrying on the multiverses. In fact, they are definitely getting, because they're into 2022 already planning, and that's got to be Phase 5, right? So Doctor Strange.
Mm-hmm. I mean, without, because they wouldn't need to have Doom as the figurehead that he was in Secret Wars. They could easily replace him with Kang. The role he played, and because Kang and the Fantastic Four, tangle quite regularly, and obviously the Fantastic Four are the ones who time travel and kind of go between dimensions, out of the heroes, of the Marvel universe. I kind of see them kind of possibly swooping in near the end and, being the one with the, ability to sort all this mess out, potentially.
And I can kind of see them starting in the 60s.
I see. Yeah, that's been like a fan theory for a long time that I love and I hope is true. So I would love a 60s set Fantastic Four movie, and then have them need to time travel the future for whatever reason because of this whole multiversal madness.
Yeah, like there's so many ways it could go. I mean, as you say, we're definitely kind of assembling a Young Avengers, which is something we will talk about. I think when we discuss Black Widow for reasons that I'm sure the audience already knows, but we're going to save until we do the Black Widow recording later on this week. And I think maybe they're kind of going to push it to them to kind of save the day, possibly.
I mean, I think they'll play. I think they'll have a role to play. I don't see them as the ones to necessarily sort all of that out, but I do see that by the time we get to the end of Phase 4, there could potentially be a Young Avengers team assembled already.
Yeah, definitely. I think we're gonna go there. I mean, they kind of got to have it assembled by the time Doctor Strange is finished. One assumes that Wanda is going to be retrieving her kids from wherever,
right? And America Chavez, who is a Young Avenger, is being introduced in Doctor Strange Multiverse Madness. So basically, yeah, I could see that by the end of that movie, they've got pretty much all of their players in place. That we'll have Kate Bishop by then. We'll have America Chavez. So yeah, by that point, I think you've got your core team of Young Avengers minus like Hulkling, who may or may not, get a first appearance in She-Hulk.
Sure. Which of course they're very much discussing now, and by all accounts, it might be very Deadpool influenced. I mean, whether that means we're going to get the full 4 breaks, I don't know. I'm not sure that's something I want out of She-Hulk personally.
Yeah, I mean, it's a little weird, but hey, I'll take it. I'm fine.
Yeah, and again, they do the things that you wouldn't expect very well.
Yes,
I will say. There's been a lot of scuttlebutt lately, though, that, I mean, a lot of people seem to be turning their back on the MCU. I think the series have kind of put a few people off. I understand some of the criticisms. I see some faults in each series. But for me, the gripes are kind of minor. And I am actually really excited about where it's going to go now. And I don't see the point of necessarily dropping out at the most exciting moment.
I think that the series, I get it, but if you look at them as a connected sort of entity that exists, between films, I think, they've built up something really clever between the 3 series, even though they've all been very different, and they were, we were told, oh no, they're all standalone, but actually, each one kind of, adds another little piece to the overall puzzle.
And I certainly, I'm not sure it's going to be possible to watch the next few Marvel movies without having seen this series in particular.
It certainly wouldn't be as straightforward or satisfying to just watch the films. I think you could. I'm sure they're always clever enough to, to make things stand alone enough to be enjoyed. But at the same time, I think, especially now with the Loki series, I think, it's kind of pretty integral for you to understand, where all this multiverse stuff came from, that's going to ripple out into these films. It happens here.
Yeah, absolutely. And speaking as someone who really wasn't interested at the beginning of the whole MCU thing, and I really wasn't, I was just kind of, I can say that I've grown interested, and I think they've really kind of, done something unique, and it continues to be unique. I think there are faults faults. I think there's technical faults and things like that as a person who loves film first and foremost, I have issue with, and I still have issue with, and indeed we are going to probably talk about that when we talk about Black Widow in a few days. But I don't necessarily understand this kind of dislike that's coming in. I've spoken to a few people who I know and respect who are really kind of hated it, and I don't get it. I think the problem is there really wasn't a lot of action happening for people, and instead it is just two people in a room talking. But you've got to look at the subject that they're discussing, and
I was riveted to that. It's like you could have heard a pin drop, like while I was watching it. It was just I was really interested to to hear his explanation for all this stuff, because I know how important it's going to be going forward. And that what they're discussing is going to have like a huge impact on not just this series, but the next phase of films, in my opinion. So I thought it was a great episode. And what you're saying about pushback and about people maybe growing disenchanted and saying, oh, I didn't like it. I mean, there are always going to be people who feel that way, when something like the MCU exists, that kind of just, it's a big machine. It keeps churning out stories, and, you can always opt out. You can always opt out.
Totally.
You can always pick and choose what you want to watch. Maybe you just want to watch the films.
Although I do understand partially the argument of, although I dismissed it initially with David when I did the interview with David Anderson a few months back. I don't think you have to watch everything. However, they do sometimes make it a bit difficult not to watch everything. And there is a bit of cultural ubiquity to it all that I find somewhat alarming. I find any form of cultural ubiquity a bit alarming, really. Because I think what it does to the rest of the art is really negative. And actually, I think one of the negative aspects of the MCU is the fact that everything's got to be a shared universe now. And whenever I hear that about some things, I'm just like, please, God, no, just make something.
Right. I mean, well, that is like bandwagon jumping. And, obviously, well, no, it's not just an element of it. It's like, obviously, it has been to the detriment of several franchises that they tried to do that, in the way that they did. I would argue that, I think the very obvious example is like the monster verse. With the Mummy and, Godzilla and King Kong and all that. I mean, that like flopped really hard. And they it was just very forced.
Well, I mean, Godzilla seems to be doing well because they keep making Godzilla movies.
I mean, the individual films, did okay. But I mean, I think the Mummy did pretty terrible. But all the,
Universal. The
big idea to create a shared universe out of it just didn't work.
Yeah.
However, and also, I would argue that that the way they went about doing the Justice League, for me, that failed very spectacularly. I think that they rushed into it instead of trying to build up to it. I just don't think they went about it the right way. I think it'll turn out okay in the end, but for me, it was done very poorly by comparison to the Marvel universe. And, as far as shared universes go, I think the only really successful one, that continues to be successful is, in fact, the Marvel universe, or the MCU, rather.
Yeah.
And it's because somebody who really understands comics and comic book storytelling is, the one who's sort of the maestro at the top. Absolutely, and that makes all the difference. Yeah. So I mean, the fact that people are jaded against it, it's like, okay, that's fine. If you're sick of it, there is a lot of movies, it's huge. But it is like nothing else. There is nothing else like it. And, you can either embrace that or you can kind of, like become disenchanted with it. That's fine. If it's too much for you, then it's too much. Just stop watching it. Or pick and choose what you watch, but if you're the whole like complaining about it, oh, I'm so sick of the Marvel movies, oh, they suck now. It's just like, well, no, they don't. You're just sick of it, Sorry.
Well, I mean, this is something we are going to have to circle back to later in the week when we do Black Widow, because some of these comments will resurface in other ways. So we've got to kind of talk about that when we get the chance, which is we're aiming for kind of Friday. That should be up, guys. In the meantime, I do have to mention that this might be the last one of these after shows we do. We're currently kind of looking at that, and we might just incorporate them into the comic show. But we'll see. I mean, I think we
haven't discussed this.
We have discussed this.
No, we haven't.
We have. But yeah, I mean, everything changes. We are kind of looking at different ways to bring all this stuff to you guys, and if you've got some ideas or things in particular you'd like to see us do hit us up in the comments. How did you feel about the end of Loki? I would love to know that. I'd love to hear from some of our listeners and watchers out there. How did you feel about it? Where do you think it's going to go? Because obviously, being not a neophyte to Marvel, but someone who doesn't have their kind of nose in it as much, I'm just kind of making guesses out of what I've read in terms of the comics, which isn't a great deal. But I'd love to know what you guys think, so we can kind of discuss it on the next, whatever the next version of this is. But yeah, we will be back with the comic show quite soon, where which is kind of more comics based rather than the movies and TV. So we will pick up on the comments there. So Liz, I mean, how are you feeling about the next phase? Are you excited, or are you like? Can you sort of gauge? Think back to how you felt as you were coming towards the end of phase 3. Are you kind of more or less excited at the moment than you were?
Well, okay,
then?
so here's what I think about that. I feel like right where we are right now is kind of where I was at during phase 1 in a way, because right now what I feel like we're in kind of a phase 1 of sorts. Endgame was like, it capped off 3 phases of storytelling that came full circle, that had a beginning, middle, and end, and we're back to the beginning again. So I remember that moment where it all kind of fell into place, what they were going to be doing at the end of Avengers 1, in that after credit sequence where you first see Thanos and you first see who the big foe is going to be. And I feel like we're still in that in that coming up to that moment. It isn't clear yet if, is Kang going to be the Thanos? Is that going to be the next like big phase? Is it, from all this, the seeds they've been planting, it looks like that could very well be, that in fact, the next big phase of stories is going to be about the multiverse, possibly with Kang as sort of the Thanos, like, figure. That's possible, but anything's possible right now. That's what I like about this phase. We're early stages, where in the first 3 phases, it was really clear what they were doing. They were building up the Infinity Stones. They were building up to the Infinity Gauntlet. They were, and that was brilliant. I thought that was just amazing. I thought that it was an incredible thing that they could carry out, a storyline over 10 years worth of films, 23 films, and tell a whole cohesive story. And right now we're very much back in the territory of the unknown. We don't really know if they're going to even attempt to do something like that again. But I'd love it if they did. I thought, because it was so exciting, going through those films, when they introduced each stone, you knew that they were building up to something huge, and then they delivered on that, and it was amazing. So I would love if they could recreate that kind of excitement for me. And, I am really excited you know, to see what it's going to be, what the next big story that they're going to tell is.
I'm just thinking now, actually, you know, we don't know that Kang will be the big bad. We don't even know that Doom will be the big bad. It could be Sylvie.
It could be anyone. We don't know.
It could, yeah. Like, I mean, there is an interesting kind of open field to kind of play on right now. Although they know, because they've planned a couple of years ahead, as I understand. So it's gonna be fun times. And of course, there is part of you that always is more interested in the things you aren't sure of. Like, so we know what's coming out, but it's like, well, beyond that, will there be things announced that we don't, you know, that we're kind of.
I mean, we know we've got the FF on the horizon. We know we've got the X-Men on the horizon. You know, it's like basically we're in just hugely unknown territory. I mean, you know, we could be building up to like an Avengers versus X-Men for all we know. We don't know.
I'm glad actually that the one rumor that hasn't popped up throughout all this is this will be the thing that introduces mutants, which I'm really surprised at.
I know, yeah, because everything's going to be the thing that introduces mutants.
And Mephisto is going to be the big bad of every. But hey, we played that game too during. That
was
WandaVision. You know,
it's a fun game.
We were dead set on it being Mephisto.
Yeah, I was dead set on the bird being Mephisto, the lamp being Mephisto.
So, I'm really, really curious to see what's going to happen or where we're going to end up. But yeah, exciting times ahead. And we'll be here for it in one form or another. So later on this week, Black Widow. We'll be doing that. It's somewhat belated. As I said, we've just been caught up in life and work and things. We've got to earn a crust around this. But please help us out with the Patreon, because that would mean we could do more of these shows and
sooner, you know, on time.
We are sorry about that, guys. It really got away from us. But
we should be back to a regular schedule, you know.
Yes. Yeah.
With the comic show.
Pods, I'm very behind on getting the podcasts versions of these out. So thank you to anyone who's listening on the podcast version. I really appreciate your patience. I think Wednesday or Thursday there is going to be a massive drop of podcasts. So I'm going to get us all up to date with every video. Will be out as a podcast. So I'm sorry for anyone listening on Spotify and Apple who's wondered where they've gone. It is just a sort of scheduling issue. But we'll be back. Follow the Comic Crush at the Comic Crush on Twitter and Instagram. You can follow Liz at Liz C. Jordan on Twitter. You can check out Liz's writing on comics and comic book movies on her website, lizcjordan.com. You can follow the Comic Crush every week and see what's there. I've got some great stuff lined up. I will be writing about the kind of possible repercussions of multiversal storytelling, I hope, this week for the website. Please do take a look at that. And don't forget to drop me a line, tell me what you think. Paul at thecomiccrush.com is my email, or you can DM on the Twitter. Or you can follow me at Comic Crush Paul on Twitter and talk to me there. Hit me up, talk to me, tell me what you think. I'm interested. Liz, thank you very much for doing this. We'll see you soon for Black Widow.
Indeed.
Anything else you want to add to this before we disappear into our own multiverse?
No, Paul. I think I'm just ready to go down the rabbit hole into an alternate timeline.
Yes, I'd like an alternate timeline myself right now. Right, guys, thanks very much, and we'll catch you soon. Remember, stay safe, wear a mask. There you go. That's my political affirmation for the day. Wear a mask, look after yourselves, and we'll catch you next time on The Crush.
Bye.
Bye-bye.